You are listening to the CADDle Call podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of ZenTek Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The CADDle Call podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the CADDle Call podcast with Jim and Rocco from ZenTek Consultants. I am Jim, your fun and friendly host, and with me, as always, is my partner,
Rocco.
See,
I'm more fun and I'm more friendly. That's all I gotta say.
No, you're not, and that's why you have to suffer through the engineering joke of the week. You're not fun or friendly enough. I'm going to make you fun and friendly. Ready for this?
Ready.
Okay. Did you hear about the mechanical engineer who got pinched between two gears?
No.
He got a little behind in his work. Just awful. What a terrible joke. And the worse they are, the more I like them. That's the sad part. Oh, all right, folks. We actually have a guest on the show today. Michael Davidson, who is the product manager for BIM and CAD Integrations at ESRI, is back with us once again. So, Michael, I really appreciate your being on the show, man. But you must be an absolute glutton for punishments. This is like your third time here. Most people are smart enough to stop talking to Rocco and I after one visit. So, all right. So, look, despite your obvious lack of taste in venue, we do love having you on. So, thank you for being here, man. I appreciate it. All right. So, for today's program, we're going to focus on the value of integrating GIS data into your civil designs, right? But of course, before we get into that, I want to give folks a little bit of background on Michael so you all know why you should listen carefully to everything that he has to say to you today. So Michael, what should people know about your background and kind of what led to your current role at ESRI?
Well, first, thanks for having me back on the show. And if nothing else, I get to be the first to hear the latest engineering joke of the week. So it's always a pleasure.
I'm so sorry, man.
Looking forward to many more. But as far as my background and what led me to ESRI, so I have a PhD in civil engineering, and that's always, gotten me up to no good. But I also have a PE to practice. And before joining ESRI back in 2023, I was in academia at university for about 10 years prior to that. So, part of my duties there was, the usual kind of professor type activities, but it was also a big part of it was developing bridge structure and foundation design software. And I was really cruising along there. But back in about 2019, there was this project that was taken on much larger than me. There was about 20 plus United States DOT and other bridge folks. They all got together and they started this project, BIM for bridges and other structures. And I did get involved in that a little bit. And I'll never forget this kind of light bulb moment for me, it just going off in my head that, oh my gosh, I don't have to recreate this model from scratch in this software and then that software. Instead we can get that information, all talk to each other and not have to start from scratch. So it was just a real light bulb moment for me back in about 2019. And ever since then, I've just stayed obsessed with interoperability. And that's eventually led me to this role at ESRI, where I get to really, as a product manager, live in the problem space, live in the space where things are clunky and not working, and try to figure out, what and the why for helping not just in BIM workflows, but workflows where BIM information, CAD line work, GIS data all needs to flow across all these different professionals and then their tools and their different software stacks. So there you go. There's my journey that led me to ESRI and why everyone should listen to every word I have to say.
See, there you go. There you go. See, I love it. If you guys like us, we always get involved in this because we're problem solvers. We like to fix things. It's really what it boils down to. It's funny. All right. So look, I'm sure that everybody listening has heard of ESRI, even if they're not actively working with that system yet. ESRI is the biggest name in the GIS world, and it pioneered a lot of the processes and the basic concepts in the GIS space, right? So those two words, right, ESRI and GIS, they're pretty much interchangeable. But I do think it's good to get a little bit of background on the company as well, and kind of where they play in the design world that maybe listeners aren't aware of. So, Michael, what do you see as Esri's role in kind of the AEC and transportation world as opposed to just, the pure GIS?
So Esri is pretty conference focused. There's always conferences going on. We have this big one every year in July called the Esri User Conference. It gets 15 to 20,000 people. It's pretty massive, and there's always these very dedicated themes. And this year, the theme was integrate everything everywhere. So I really appreciated that being in the integration space at Esri. But for AEC and transportation, we want those integrations to take some phrases that can be kind of buzzy at times, things like, digital transformation, and try to, through our integrations, bring them a little bit, down to earth, closer to earth, a little bit closer to reality, but do it across all the phases of anything that gets built, from early on in planning all the way out through operations, and then have all that information help support new projects that are being built in that vicinity. And so, what we want to do for AEC, for transportation, is we want to, make it as simple as we can for these different project roles, whether you're a civil designer, whether you're out in the field, a project coordinator, to collaborate, to work together. And we want to increase the types of project roles in AEC and transportation that can stay in their preferred software tool, whether it's a specialized desktop tool, a web browser, whether it's a mobile device out in the field, but be able to work with any little subset, any piece of GIS or CAD or BIM data that needs to flow into their device so they can make a better decision and get that information back out so it's available to other stakeholders. So, what we're really doing for AC and transportation is try to connect all those different project teams and their data, and it's not just Esri, it's across systems, Autodesk, there are others as well. So, maybe just to make that a little bit more specific, a little more concrete, one example that comes to my mind is, you think about a civil designer and a field worker. So we have integrations, right now for AEC, for transportation, that allow a field worker, they can go out, they can capture the location, the conditions, photos of, assets. Is it a fire hydrant? Is it a manhole cover? Is it, something really significant that's out there on the project site? But then send all that information about its location, its conditions, any supporting information back over the web while they're still out there on the site. And then it's available through web services that bring that linked information, into environments like Civil 3D, for example, or AutoCAD drawings. So it's really about trying to simplify all that information flow across these different tech stacks to help all these different roles in AEC and transportation.
Yeah, and that's a great feature. I mean, it certainly beats the old days where it's like, oh no, we forgot to get the info on that manhole. Send someone back out in the truck. We'll get it tomorrow. Right. It really saves a lot of headaches. So look, folks, I have talked a lot on the podcast in the past about how I really think that Esri and Autodesk have formed one of the best and smartest strategic partnerships in the modern business world. Two companies that were at one time very serious rivals. They decided to cooperate and share customers instead of fighting over them. And the business benefit for both companies has just been amazing, right? Both companies' profits have gone up 5 to 6 times what they were before that partnership. And, hey, look, that's great for investors and such, right? But it's really beneficial to those of us who actually use both of these software systems. So Michael, what can you share with folks about the partnership between Esri and Autodesk, right? How does it work and what real world benefits have come from it so far?
Yeah, that's great. So Esri and Autodesk, as you all talked about, they formed that big strategic partnership. It was way back in 2017. And even just, me being at Esri at 2 years and change, it is neat to see how through that partnership, we're just kind of steadily adding to the richness and the variety of roles that can work with that data across their systems and whatever tool that they have, whatever device they have. And it did start out with, we had this kind of long-standing integrations on the Esri side for, GIS analysts to consume CAD drawings, for example, or, some long-standing integrations to work in AutoCAD, for example. But since that partnership, it is really neat to see it kind of spread out. And so now you have, built-in capabilities for Civil 3D to work with GIS services and InfraWorks, for example. Those have definitely come out as part of those partnership activities. But then even subsequent to that, we've further expanded these integrations to, construction management, asset management. So we have these cloud-based functionality that kind of situates a project manager or an asset manager between the ESRI, the GIS worlds, the Autodesk, the BIM worlds, and allows them to coordinate just in a simple web app, across teams on their stand-up meetings, resolving issues, those types of things, keeping up with all the project controls that they have for their projects. And then even more recently, this one's a little bit more hot off the presses, is that we've added an integration specific to planners and architects working in cloud-based tools, Autodesk Forma, so they can bring GIS context on demand right into their proposals and those types of things. And, so that's all exciting, but, what are those real world benefits? And along those lines, I was just thinking about a survey, an industry research report that came out, I think it's maybe 2 years ago or so. And they queried, owners, AEC firms about, what's your all's take on the benefits to integrating, these GIS and these design worlds. And the stats that came out of that, just noting them here, looks like, from that industry research, it was that an average design time savings for projects was something about, like 28%. And then average project cost savings, was about 13%. So it's cool to see that recognition, out there, by the AEC firms, for example, that, okay, if you do commit to these data flows, that you do actually see savings for time and cost. So.
Yeah, that's excellent. So Rocco, let's wake you up. So with all your calls with clients, right? Have you been seeing more or less interest in kind of ESRI and GIS being integrated with tools like Civil 3D from our clients as the years have been going on?
Yeah, there's definitely been more, and it's it's certainly welcome. Jim, we're older than Michael, and I can't tell you how many.
You're older than dirt, so that's not saying much.
I can't tell you how many times I've seen over the years where there's third-party applications that are trying to integrate with Autodesk, and these are people that are really smart, in industry professionals, and they try to make the applications work with Autodesk solutions, and then it just the marriage doesn't happen well, and so I've been on the other side of sales and operations, where it's like you're seeing all the cases flowing back and forth, and this plugin's working now, and this plug isn't working today, and it'll be working tomorrow, and so that can really become a nightmare. So to see the integration between the two companies is big, and a lot of companies, a lot of customers are really happy to see that as well. It helps with their everyday workflows, and Michael just gave some of the stats to prove it.
Yeah, oh, that's perfect. All right, so look, I think there are still a lot of people out there listening who are intimidated by the GIS world, right? They still believe that it's a completely separate skill set, right? And it's an entirely different way of thinking and working, in unfamiliar software, right? That doesn't play well in the civil infrastructure design systems that we use every single day. And look, that may have been true a decade ago, right? But it really has not been the case for quite a while now. There are a number of tools and apps that are specific to the CAD GIS integration process that I think can really save you a ton of time and provide, a lot of really vital information for your specific, project designs. So Michael, what CAD, BIM, GIS tools and apps do you think bring kind of the most benefit to all the engineers and techs listening to the show?
So across that, that landscape of integrations I was referring to earlier, and I alluded to, we've reached a point to where we have these built-in GIS integrations in several Autodesk tools, InfraWorks and Civil 3D. And then also, in coordination with Autodesk, we develop an app over on the ESRI side. It's called ArcGIS for AutoCAD. And it's a no-cost a plugin, but it also installs on top of Civil 3D and AutoCAD Map 3D and AutoCAD. And the promise of it is that it gives engineers and CAD techs the ability to just grab whatever existing conditions they need from the GIS on demand and add it to their drawings. And that's, it doesn't matter whether it's you're going to a municipality's public, that's a tough word to say, public information to pull in, I don't know, parcels or whatever they have available, or maybe within your firm, your GIS team has a portal or an org, as we call it, stood up. You can draw upon a bunch of your project specific layers, or, ESRI provides curated authoritative content through what we call the Living Atlas. So you have that agency through these integrations for the engineers, the CAD teams, to just gain all that access on demand. And the idea there is that we want to do away with the days of having these really large engineering teams. We've seen maybe 100 plus, civil designers on one project, and they're working with maybe 3 to 5 GIS analysts. So, what'll happen is if you don't have these integrations, that large design team, they'll go inundate the really small GIS team. Hey, we need you to find and package up shape files, and we need you to point us to them. Well, instead of, having to have that bottleneck and that iterative process and those snapshots of your site plan information come from shapefiles. Instead, through these integrations like ArcGIS for AutoCAD, you just build up your site plans on demand at will by drawing upon whatever layers are beneficial to you. And so it's really a big part of it is about just giving that agency to the large groups of designers and removing them from that bottleneck of having to rely on asks piecemeal of the GIS team. But there's another aspect of it here with these types of integrations where it's not just for, kind of adding that context or setting that, the base maps, the backdrop for your designs. It's really takes it further to where, we allow them, or we aspire to allow them more and more to transact on that linked data that they're pulling down from the GIS, but edit it and transact on it in very CAD-like ways. It kind of goes back to what you're saying is, the GIS world for a long time is maybe thought to be, it's its own discipline, it's its own tech stack, and it sure is. But through these integrations, we want to bring that GIS information in and make it very CAD-like in terms of how you interact with it. But behind the scenes, it's linked up to your GIS. So any design decisions you make, they are now able to be synchronized and transacted back up through the GIS. So that project manager can know, your latest decision about where a pipeline should go, or, the field team knows where they need to be looking on site for those, manhole covers we talked about, or the GIS analyst can use it. But, it's really not just about contextualizing the drawings on demand. It's about giving that ability to share your design decisions back up with all those other project stakeholders through the web.
Yeah, you're basically democratizing the data, man. It's the right way to do it.
Yep.
It works so nicely. All right, folks, let's take a quick commercial break here. And when we get back, I do want to talk to Michael about kind of the upcoming releases and future goals of ESRI and GIS, all right? So stick around, folks. We'll be back in just a minute with more of the CADDle Call podcast. Hey, everybody, it's Jim and Rocco from ZenTek Consultants, and we wanted to talk to you guys today about Managed CAD Services by ZenTek Consultants. Look, every one of us out there in the design space, we're looking for that power person who can handle all of your standards and templates and file structures and answer all your CAD problems. But we run into 2 big issues. Number one, those folks don't come cheap, especially when you start adding in all of the taxes, insurances, and time off and stuff you got to add in. And then you've got to find someone that you can trust. And that's where ZenTek Consultants come in, because I got to figure you guys are listening to us every week talk. You got to trust us. And we come in and handle all your CAD management needs for you with our Managed CAD Services contracts, an annual contract where we can be your CAD manager, doing all the things that you need done for an affordable rate with people whose technology acumen you know and trust. So Rocco, why don't you tell folks where they can find out more about Managed CAD Services and get the ball rolling?
Yep, you can hit up our website, zentekconsultants.net, and if you go under the services section, you'll be able to see the details. You could also give us a call, 866-824-4459, or drop us an email, sales@zentekconsultants.net.
There you go. All the CAD management help that you need but have not been able to get is available with Managed CAD Services by ZenTek Consultants. All right, everybody, welcome back to the CADDle Call podcast. We're talking with Michael Davidson from ESRI about how GIS can improve the civil workflow process, right? And in the top of the show, we talked about some general concepts and tools, right? And now I kind of want to get into, what new stuff is coming our way from ESRI, right? In both, general GIS and in particular, what civil and transportation integrations they're working on for us. So Michael, I know you have a release coming out soon, right? What's in there for folks using Civil 3D and AutoCAD to get excited about?
So the development team for ArcGIS for AutoCAD, they were wildly productive for this upcoming release. It's one of those where product managers, it's a rare bird to say, okay, we got to slow down a little bit. We got to slow down a little bit. They really
cut the caffeine in the coffee.
Yeah, exactly. And so we are aiming for an October, November timeframe for the next release of ArcGIS for AutoCAD. And among that litany of items that they did work up, I did just kind of give thought to maybe 3 of them for today. That are leaning into those, supporting those civil workflows in particular. So the first is support for what we call in the GIS world related records, and that might be a little bit of a foreign concept to somebody in civil design, but to give it a little more concrete treatment. So let's say that you're an engineer and you're supporting like an airport rehabilitation project, for example. Maybe you're looking at runway lights, runway pavement health, the pavement markings, and that at that airport you've got safety inspectors daily, maybe twice daily, physically assessing all of that. They're out there and they're storing the records, their comments, their descriptions, anything cracked, any pavement marking that's fading. They're storing those records up in a related records geodatabase table. And you as the civil designer, you're down in say Civil 3D, you need that information to inform, contextualize, so that you can make a better project recommendation about that portion of the airport that you're trying to rehabilitate. So later this year, what we're going to do is we're going to add support for those GIS related records. So now if you're in your civil drawing and you select on a runway light or a pavement marking in your drawing, you can just pull up the record of inspections for it right within Civil 3D and say, okay, yeah, this manufacturer is really giving us trouble, or this brand of paint's really giving us trouble, for example. And you can swap out your recommendation where it's been informed by those related records. You don't have to have a 4 million line Excel spreadsheet handed to you. You can just pull it up live right there within Civil 3D as a dialogue that you work with.
Nice.
So that's one. Another one is we've worked with some of our partner data providers, Report All, Regrid, and they provide these authoritative parcel data sets. And so Civil 3D, AutoCAD users, they can bring that authoritative parcel data into their drawings on demand. It's through the web, and it just goes back to that theme I was harping on earlier, is just eliminating that need to go beg and wait for your small GIS team to package up shapefiles. Instead, you've got that Report All or Regrid service. Great, you just pull it right into your Civil 3D, your AutoCAD drawing, and you can have some trust that those are good parcels, because that's the whole point of those data providers, that they're up to date and that kind of thing, and then rock on with where you need to establish your right of ways or limits of disturbance, etc. And then third, we added support that it's what in the GIS world is called M-enabled polylines. And to kind of translate that into the CAD world, what this is going to do is it's going to allow for those Civil 3D users to bring down centerline information with the stationing for roadways and railways and the bridge centerlines, the pipelines, that kind of thing. And now this is our first shot at that. And so we want to do more with it. But over time, what we're really angling toward here is working to streamline that interplay between these GIS representations of your roads and your highways and your pipelines and the Civil 3D representations, like alignment objects, for example. So we want to make that type of information inform the Civil 3D designers, what roadways or pipelines are intersecting the one I'm trying to design. But it also gives a way to, yet again, kind of get that information back out to like the field team, so they know where the heck they are, on a transportation project. So, kind of the big themes here is we're working to really empower these engineering teams to get that immediate access to more types of useful information from the GIS, but also allowing them to push their decisions up to that information up to other stakeholders, the project managers, the field teams, so that they can take advantage of it as well.
Nice. Yeah, I've been reading a little bit about the polylines and what you can do, and that idea, it's something you guys have in GIS, right, with that real-time data and the stationing and the layout, and the concept that as a different update is being made, even by a completely different firm, right? They're doing real world work and updating that data. When the GIS database gets updated, it can be pulled through. Yeah, the long term potential there is just amazing. I'm really looking forward to see what you guys do with that. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right, folks. Look, I always like to hear about all the upcoming tools in a new release, right? But I think the listeners to our show here, they really like to understand kind of the business direction, right, that a company like ESRI is taking. Knowing what you're seeing in the market and what tools and processes and concepts you are developing to address those. I think it helps listeners plan out their own workflows for the future. Tech keeps advancing and morphing so fast, right, that small companies can't always keep track of where things are going, right? So we tend to look at, the big tech giants like ESRI to kind of give us a flagpole, right, to aim at in the coming years. So Michael, where do you see ArcGIS and Autodesk and related stuff heading in the future?
Well, with AI being so buzzy, right, you can't have a technical conversation these days without uttering that word. We of course have some development thrusts on the ESRI side, for this GIS and the CAD integration space. So if you think about an engineer, a CAD technician, there's a couple of kind of problems that we've helped kind of identify or hear patterns, from the customers, from the users. And one of them is kind of simplifying the way that you can take advantage of imagery, for example. So, I mean, we're not, inventing anything new here, but, feature extraction. So you got some site imagery, you want to extract the building footprints or parking spaces or trees, or anything really. And what we're seeing is some opportunities to further kind of marry together the ESRI, the Autodesk worlds by taking ESRI's pre-trained deep learning models and kind of putting those right into the hands of a Civil 3D or an AutoCAD user. So the idea is you could bring in some imagery, for example, from your GIS, and then we, through like ArcGIS for AutoCAD, for example, we could have some functionality that you kind of semantically query the imagery to say, hey, give me the building footprints from it. And then, it'll take seconds to whatever to kind of chew on that and process that information through the pre-trained deep learning models. But then you get CAD content of the building footprints and the parking lots and the oil tanks and all, whatever we have those pre-trained deep learning models for, you can generate CAD content from it within your Civil 3D or AutoCAD environment. You don't have to have kind of a specialist or somebody with a specialized tool to do that feature extraction for you. So I would say that's one, kind of along the lines of the buzzy AI stuff direction that we're certainly taking. Another one is, and it's in that same vein of AI, is, we recognize that we see organizations like large AEC firms, they'll have tens of thousands of services in the GIS. And on each one of those services, you could have 10 layers, that can be translated down into CAD and useful in CAD potentially. But you take 30,000, multiply it by 10, I can't do arithmetic too good these days, but that's a lot of layers. You've got a big haystack. And so we're looking at some ways to use, to leverage AI, some machine learning, to where you could say, hey, I'm a civil designer. I've got a roadway project, and I need this type of information. I need wetlands. I need the railways that are intersecting. I need, et cetera. You kind of give it a human description of who you are and what you're looking for, and then it'll kind of, again, this is very forward-looking, but kind of sweep through that big haystack and pull out the needles for you that could be most pertinent to you. So I would say those are some of the business directions that we're taking. And we're no exception. We're, like everyone else, kind of leaning into those machine learning, those AI aspects from a business standpoint. Makes perfect sense.
So Rocco, how does what Michael just talked about kind of fit in with what you're hearing from our clients, right? Do you find that, the businesses we're dealing with are thinking along those same lines, or do you see people focusing on something different in the future?
What is AI? Yeah. Look, everybody's looking for what AI is going to solve these days, and not everybody's jumping on the bandwagon of adopting everything, but everybody's watching it like they're watching the birds in their backyard, so it's critical. And look, we all know how expensive some of these solutions are, ESRI and Autodesk solutions, and they're worth the money, but people want productivity out of it. We're still in an area in a situation where there's worker shortages and a lot of people are overworked. And so you want to get productivity out of what you're spending on. And so, yeah, this is all great stuff.
Okay, that works. All right, so look, one other area that I see as a huge change coming our way, it's kind of the full integration of data models into a single source for your project, right? I think that data that's software agnostic is the best thing for our industry. We should someday be able to pull the GIS, the civil, the architectural, the utilities, the roadways, the wetlands, everything, right? From any software, right? Or from any one location, rather, into any software from a central repository, kind of, with most especially without the need for conversions or alterations or modifications. The ideal is that I can use, ArcGIS to update the data, and that all those changes then are instantly available for the engineering groups, whichever one they may be, to use without having to do any kind of copying or converting files and so on, right? It's just a native centralized data setup. So Michael, in terms of that, right, what about the broader integrations across GIS and CAD, right? What can teams working with all of this different project data look forward to longer term?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it can't be more sincere. I strongly agree with that assessment there, Jim. Is really letting it to be a state where it's software agnostic. Everybody can reach into the big giant mountain of evolving project data and pull it out and use it in their respective device. So, a couple of directions that come to my mind on this question. One is, the support for open interoperability. And so you have organizations out there like Building Smart International, for example, doing a great job, and they're pushing hard to advance what's called industry foundation classes, or in other words, IFC. So that allows for you to say, well, I don't care what tool, I don't care if you're coming from Revit or Civil 3D or you're going into ArcGIS Pro. I don't care about any of that. We have an open, kind of industry-informed, software vendor-informed standard for how we're going to express information about a bridge or a roadway or a building, et cetera. And everybody, all these different vendors, we get on board with agreeing to drawing upon those exchanges, being able to consume and or export to that format. So, I would say that's a direction that's pretty darn valuable that I see ESRI, I see Autodesk doing a great job in supporting that. And some of the next generation directions that they're taking there is to not, and they're being open about it, the Building Smart folks, they're not just taking like a file format approach. They want to take, more like a services-based approach where it's not an all or nothing. You're not saying I want every bit of information about this bridge or this building, but I want a little granular subset. I want to draw out of that just maybe a little bit about, one of the piers of the bridge or one of the pier columns of the bridge and use that in whatever tool I have. So they're taking that direction where it's not just going to be file-based, but it's going to be service-based. And they're open, it's going to be years down the road, because it's a big goal. But in terms of, these broader integrations and things that folks can look forward to, I just want to maybe, really sincerely agree with you, Jim. I think it's not having one gated, project data set that's to rule them all and is vendor specific. It's really supporting these open interoperability formats that's going to be key to letting all these different systems connect to each other as a connected data environment rather than one kind of, one ring to rule them all, one common data environment, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think, like I said, long term, the penultimate goal is, you can be working in ArcGIS and I'm over here working in Civil and Rocco's over in, a Bentley system, and we're all working the same job, and it doesn't matter. We're literally just opening and saving the data from the same source from different software systems based on, that give us the best tools for what we need to do. And like you said, get as granular as you need, get in and say, hey, I need this specific, piling, and I need to know what the bolt sizes are. And it's the ultimate. I can't wait till we get there. I'm looking forward to that. So,
yeah.
All right, folks, as always, whenever I have a guest, right, you guys know I like to give them the last word to talk about something I didn't think to ask on my agenda for today's show. So, Michael, what else do you think folks should be thinking about in the GIS world that I didn't think to ask you today?
Well, I'll sneak two things in here for this one. So first is we recognize on the ESRI side, the Autodesk side, it's hard enough to become an expert in CAD or BIM or GIS. It's hard enough to become an expert in one tool. It takes years to become an expert in Civil 3D, ArcGIS Pro, those types of things. And, we recognize that that's a challenge in and of itself, let alone getting GIS and CAD and BIM information to talk to each other. And so, what we're really leaning hard into this year and for the next year as well, I see is, trying to simplify any of these integrations as much as we can, through product development, sure, but it's also through, us putting resources out there. So I guess one of the things I wanted to share was that we've put quite a bit of best practices, resources out there for folks, for things like getting location information intact upstream as part of, authoring your CAD and BIM data sets. For example, we see with Civil 3D, Map 3D, that's not really that much of an issue to get that location information, but, Revit can be a challenge, just in terms of the best practices, not in terms of the tech. So we put out a lot of information out this year to really get into the nitty gritty of the picks and clicks of, how you can take that Civil 3D site plan and get that location information intact in that Revit model so that everybody downstream is not having to play detective and come back to you and figure out, well, what coordinate system did you use? What are your real world coordinates? That kind of thing. And we're also leaning into automation resources. So, for those downstream workflows to get, CAD and BIM data into the GIS, for example, so that it's available to a project manager, an asset manager they're not going to become experts in these specialized tools. They need a web browser. They need a dashboard.
Right.
And so we're really leaning in to try to automate, getting resources out there to automate code samples, blogs, that kind of ranging the full spectrum from high level to really nitty gritty to help enable that automation. So that's kind of one is just, hey, we recognize how complicated one of these, three worlds, CAD, BIM, GIS is, let alone to get them all to talk to each other. We're trying to lean into not just product development, but putting resources out there for everybody. Second is, just the usual call of, I'm hungry as a product manager for engagement from our user base, from customers, and I want to hear the bad. I don't want to hear, how great our integrations are. I want to hear the clunky parts of workflows across GIS, CAD, and BIM tools. What do we need to make simpler still, and how do we take these integrations further? What are your ideas for that? So, just encourage the listeners, please reach out to us through the ESRI community space. I'm at conferences all throughout the year. Autodesk University is coming up, for example. ESRI has the Infrastructure Management GIS conference. Engage with us on the community, on the web. Come and find me at conferences. That's my job, to hear the bad. And that's what makes all this stuff better, actually. So
there you go. The squeaky wheel gets the oil, folks. Let Michael know where the problems are. He'll fix them. All right, everybody. With that, we are going to get out of here. But I do want to thank Michael one more time for being a trooper and always being willing to be here on the podcast, despite knowing the levels of idiocy and bad jokes that Rocco and I bring to the table. Michael, we genuinely appreciate you being here today, sir. Thank you.
Likewise. It's always a pleasure. Looking forward to the next one.
Sounds good. All right, folks, we're out of here. Go enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll catch you next time on the CADDle Call podcast. All right, everybody. Today's CADDle Call was brought to you courtesy of ZenTek Consultants. That's Rocco and I. ZenTek Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. ZenTek strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to ZenTek?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentekconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentekconsultants.net, or you can even call us 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from you all.